Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Into Zimbabwe, a weekly program brought to you by the Zimbabwe Human Rights Monitors platform. I'm your host, Karen Manzera, alongside
Liam Kanhenga. And today, Karen will be discussing youth participation in elections, particularly looking at voter registration.
Youths constitute 67.7% of Zimbabwe's population, but that is not the case when we come to elections, and youths actually have to participate in elections. So it makes one wonder why youths are not participating in elections. Is it to do with the law? Is it to do with probably the political environment, or what?
In 2013, 8% of the youth participated in elections, and then in 2018, it grew to 44.5%. However, the issues that owe to lack of youth participation or voter turnout in terms of the youth, it's because of, one, the issue to do with voter fatigue, two, issues to do with voter apathy, then there is also terror, error, and harvest of fear. If you have noticed, all elections in Zimbabwe have one thing in common, that is violence. And violence itself to vulnerable and unarmed people is discouraging. So, especially the short sleeve, long sleeve of 2008, Operation Wakavotera Ani, all these things discourage young people from expressly utilizing their right to vote, and this is what literally is dwindling the numbers or costing the numbers in terms of voter turnout amongst young people.
But Liam, I would say that youths are participating in elections because we do see them being used as campaign gadgets. But when it comes to the ballot and when it comes to, them being in decision-making processes, then we don't see them. But when violence is taking place, it is the youths who are actually summoned to come and perpetuate violence. So I think that youths are participating, but from the wrong front. So what do you think can be done then to make sure that youths are not only being used as campaign gadgets, but then they are involved even during the ballot process and even during the decision-making process?
It also comes down to incentives. When I'm a political consultant, as a student of politics, I earn money from a candidate, right? If an MP approaches me to help them with strategy, I charge them, I earn money. And that's a guaranteed result. The issue is not on the money. The issue is on the guarantees, right? But then when I'm a voter, and then I'm voting in an election that I suspect, or that has been given a perception that it's going to be rigged, or maybe my preferred candidate, my favorite, is going to lose. I'm frustrated from that, so I discourage myself. Or even when I participate with guarantee that there might be a show of violence, like what happened in 2018, 2008, in 2000, and even in 1995, what happened to Edgar Ticker and Zoom. Those things would discourage youth participating as stakeholders, but rather as technical assistants. And then when it also comes to issues of youth being active in dispensing violence to manipulate elections, like the majority of police officers, soldiers, the National Youth Service, Green Bombers, who are in the verge of being reconstituted if the bill goes through, are young people. These are people aged 15 to 35. The issue also comes to which side of politics you are in, which now speaks to the nature of politics in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwean politics is very toxic. It's very apathetic. It's characterized by acts of terror. It's a bloody political space. And that also comes on the side of the governing regime in how it tries to retain power. So there is more incentive with you being sent to manipulate a voter opinion than you trying to express a voter opinion, whether in favor or against. So it comes down to incentive and the lack of guarantees.
So I think the problem is with youths who don't have a clear vision or a long-term vision of how their participation is going to impact, our discourse, our national discourse. Because I feel like at times youths, when they are used as campaign gadgets, is because of some of the small things that they're getting. You see that youths, vanotengerwa doro Liam, for them to go and beat up people. Yes. And if they had not done that, probably the person, that politician who is buying them doro, would know that they are no-nonsense people, and what they want is, for things to be all right in the country. So I believe that youths maybe should have a long-term picture of what they want, and that could encourage them to be more involved in the voting process than in getting small things just for being used as campaign gadgets.
Yeah. Karen, just to get in on that part, there is something about Zimbabwean politics, or that is about Zimbabwean politicians themselves, They are very tokenistic. They always have something to offer for the short term. For example, the youth quarter that came along with an evil constitutional amendment.
Yeah.
And young people are expected to hail the amendment because of that. So it speaks even to the outside, like to the most general aspect of Zimbabwean politics, where young people are part and parcel of a dejected mass that is suffering and disenfranchised, with an 85% unemployment rate, with an economy shrinking at -6 as per 2020 Zimcode reports. And then these are the same people that are looking for a way out. So politicians now using mechanisms and tactics that address the most immediate needs that they have. For example, buying them alcohol. They're looking for bliss. They're looking for a moment of happiness. Giving them money. They're looking for something to survive, to see the next day. Threatening them with violence. They are looking for security, and they're looking for an environment where they exist with less trouble. But then also on another level of analysis, we have to look at the general norms and laws of society. For example, Zimbabwean politics is very ageist. I still remember in 2018 having a candidate who was below 50 years or even below 45. He was named childish. He was ridiculed as inexperienced. But then we are forgetting that that's the same guy who became a minister at the age of 31. It's the same guy who became an MP at the age of 22. But then now all of a sudden, because he wants to head the country, he's too young. So what does it do? It gives inferiority traits to young people, and it discourages them. It's an active act of discouragement. That's the reason why even young people today just feel like, you know what, politics is for the elite. The young person in Budiriro and the young person at UZ, at MSU, Harare Poly, those are two different young people. And it's because of that. The elitist approach of Zimbabwean politics is discouraging youth participation, because most of the youth are found in the grassroots. Most of the youth are downtrodden. They are the ones that compose the generality. So it's always an aspect of the philosophies, the economic system, the political system, and the mechanisms being employed.
Yeah, so Liam, I think we could spend the whole day dissecting on, the problems with our political environment, with our laws that do not encourage youth participation. But I think what's important now is on how then can we encourage youths to participate during the ballot process, because I believe that their voice does matter, because they constitute the largest percentage of the population. So what do you think that as a nation, and maybe as civic society organizations, as the government itself, what can be done to encourage youths to participate during elections?
Yeah, true. Well, Karen, the first thing at its core and at its simplest level is the issues to do with voter education.
We usually see the government saying maybe it looks like civic society's role, and civic society blaming the government for not educating voters. Yes. So whose role is it to educate voters?
Okay, so there are three main, there are three main actors in terms of playing their critical roles in encouraging people to vote. Firstly is the government. Because the government exists upon foundations of elections. So a government, whether it seeks to be elected a second time or not, it has the duty to make sure that a free, fair, credible election with active participation of citizens happens. And that is their mandate. That's why they have the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. That's why they have the media. That's why they have the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs that oversees all these Chapter 3 institutions. Don't just tell us that vote for us, go participate to vote because your preferred candidate will not, but tell them the incentive, tell them the issues to buy in, and package the message in a way that they understand. And also make sure that there are guarantees that for sure there's a benefit in voting, apart from material concerns. Then political parties. Political parties feed on elections. They exist for that sole reason, contesting in elections, even the opposition and the ruling party. So it's their job to make sure that their members, their base, is registered to vote. Because how do you win an election if the people that are supposed to elect you are not registered? So that is what they're supposed to encourage.
I do remember at some point in my constituency that the member of parliament was looking for people who would get into a certain job post, and so he required people bring their national IDs. And I remember a lot of people that we know from that political party could not even produce their documentation. So that was a question of, so how did they even vote during the voting process? But they were there, they were campaigning, but they didn't have national IDs, they didn't have documentation. So I think it again comes to the issue that you're talking about, that even political parties need to take part in voter registration, not just to come in and say vote for this political party, but to play that role, to encourage every Zimbabwean, to encourage the generality of Zimbabweans to register to vote, and to generally why it's important for people to vote, because everyone's voice matters according to the constitution.
Yeah, that's true. You spoke about the registration, citizen registration. You see now the other barrier is citizen registration and government bureaucracies. We need to deal with systematic bureaucracies that disempower people. Then the second thing is we also have to look at issues to do with active involvement of members of leaders in societies in making sure that those issues are addressed, especially empowering the orphaned and vulnerable youth, empowering the elderly, and then also dealing with matters like making registration points accessible. Because in places like Chitungwiza, during elections or towards elections, or when the elections window is opened, you can have every public school as a polling station and as a registration point. Fine. That's during the time of elections, for example, in 2017 and 18. But in the midway, let's make sure that ZEC offices are accessible in the nearest points. Let's have ZEC in Unit L, Chitungwiza. Let's have ZEC in Mkoba. Let's have a ZEC district office in the most, remote of places, in rural areas. Let not elderly people walk miles and miles to go register to vote. And also, again, let voter registration happen in a manner that is adaptive to modern day technologies. That will encourage youth participation. Then the second thing is to do with the diaspora vote. Yes, the active population of Zimbabwe predominantly is aged 15 to 35. The people we see crossing borders today to seek a living because there's no employment in Zimbabwe are young people aged 15 to 35. Those are the people that are also contributing heavily in terms of remittances into Zimbabwean economy. They send money via Mkuru, Western Union, World Remit, Paisa. There is another one, like using DHL. They're the same people using even mylaicha.com. They're the people that are cross-border entrepreneurs. So they should be allowing rooms, or there should be room for those people to participate in elections. It should be easy for them to vote even whilst they're across the border.
On violence, Liam, it's something that is coming again and again. We've seen it, in the past maybe 3-4 elections. The youths, they are the one who are the perpetuators of violence. Yes. But at the same time, we're saying that youths, if they're going to, peacefully and meaningfully be involved in the ballot process, then it would be maybe a different story. So, what's your comment on that?
Okay, so Karen, the first thing we have to look at is how, the natures and forms of violence that are happening. Firstly, there is that violence that is uncontrolled or unsanctioned violence that just happens because of friction, during elections. It's tensioners. Even, we're not just talking about national elections, or even talking about primary elections in political parties. The fact that, young people tend to get angry on behalf of candidates, even a fellow young candidate. It's very toxic. So the issue is always about then the sanction, the power above. And then we're going to look at state-sponsored violence in elections. So the first thing is, one, there is need for the government to reform, or for the ruling party itself to reform its approaches to power retention. There is no incentive in sponsoring violence or sponsoring victimhood on the part of someone because they disagree with you politically. So the government itself needs to be restrained on that. But how do we restrain it? We have civil society, we have private media, we have the international and global community watching. So there is need for strict restitutive actions or sanctioning of the government, especially when things go that way. For example, when soldiers were deployed to fire live ammunition on people that were saying we wanted free and fair election, there should be some level of sanction that comes from SADC. There should be some level of sanction that comes from the United Nations. Even if there are legal international regulations that speak on sovereignty and stuff, but there is need to enforce peacekeeping and protect human rights. So there is some need of, restraint that needs to be done. Because one thing, we all know who has the power to deploy defense forces onto the streets. That's the commander-in-chief. Who is the commander-in-chief? The incumbent head of state. So he should be held accountable for that. There should be a culture. And how do we do that? By having strong institutions. So we need institutional restructuring and reform. That's the technical aspect. Then when it comes down to society, we need to educate people in terms of the importance of respecting the rights of a certain individual. Let them know the guaranteed sanctions or the guaranteed consequences of beating up someone, and let there be examples. For example, the people that massacred 20,000 citizens in 2008 should all be brought to book, punished and arrested, so that there's transitional justice and there is healing. There should be commissions of inquiry on those things. I admire and commend the efforts that were done by the government in setting up the Mohlante Commission, despite the questions around it and a lot of betrayals around it. But that action itself spoke a lot, because it has even happened in other countries like South Africa, where they've set up commissions to inquire on issues to do with human rights violations that are politically motivated. The NPRC should be at the forefront of making sure that there is peace. Then the police themselves should start accepting that they are not militia, but they are a police that is there to enforce law and order and human security. How do they do that? By protecting everyone, regardless of their political affiliations. Because, when I get hit, there is nothing that says he's beat because he's MDC or he's beat because he's ZANU, but he was just beaten. So they have to take that sober approach. And it all starts by reforms, and the rule of law, the following of the constitution, substantive action in terms of holding those that are responsible for managing elections accountable. Then secondly, the source of conflict is always the source of suspense. The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission should forthwith cease or stop their act of delaying publication of election results. In 2008, we went for nearly a month without elections being announced. That stirred up tension, suspicion, frustration, uncertainty, and we went into chaos. That's how we ended up seeing now certain underground political tactics being taken, people going missing, and then we had even falsifications. That's the room you give, and falsifications create tension and chaos. So ZAC should learn to own up to its word. Elections, when people vote today, let people know who won the election by midnight. Simple. And we know that the methods of vote counting that are used also speak to the methods of voting. Physical ballots, they're okay, but now let's adopt technology, biometric, with real-time voter number publications. Adopting technologies will avert a lot of chaos. And then also, again, the issue of just them not, the arrogance, the institutional arrogance that ZAC had in 2018 should stop. We should do away with those things. ZAC should just accept whoever holds office, be it the chairperson, Judge Shigumba herself, Judge Kubani Moyo, Slaigwana, they should tend to accept that they don't represent the interest of a political party. They should be impartial, and they should not use their political perceptions as a means to act or respond to what happens in the political climate. So literally that's what needs to be done. And then consciousness on the young people. Let them know that there's life after elections, there's life within elections. And these elections, it's not like, it's not a do or die. It's we try today, we fail today, let's do it again tomorrow. So that's the kind of mentality and the kind of systems we need to start entrenching in our society as far as youth participation in elections is concerned.
So voting is a civic responsibility according to Liam Kanhenga. So from myself, Karen Manzera, your host, do tune in the next episode of Into Zimbabwe.